The next curve tool in the toolbar is the Extrude tool. There are two options here, Extrude and Extrude to Cursor. Now, given that we can simply use the E key to create an extrusion from a control point, it is natural to wonder why we might need a separate tool to do this job. However, there are a few differences between the two options. If we use the E key on its own, the direction in which the extension grows is by default dependent on the current viewpoint in the viewport. However, if we use the Extrude tool and move the mouse over the gizmo's plus symbol, before dragging, the extrusion will be along the line of the original control point's handle. If we drag in any other area of the gizmo, the direction of extrusion depends on the viewpoint and direction of the drag. Another consideration is that the Extrude tool tends to work better when using a digitizing tablet. Both E and the gizmo have the usual options associated with all move and extrusion operations, which we've covered in previous videos. These are listed in the status bar while the extrusion operation is being performed. For example, if we hold down X, Y, or Z during the drag process, extrusion will be along that axis, the axis set being determined by the current transform orientation setting. Pressing Shift and an axis letter restricts extrusion to the plane defined by the other two directions. Hence, pressing Shift-Z restricts extrusion to the XY plane. If you started dragging with one of the above option and want to return to unrestricted movement during the same extrusion process, press C. Pressing B moves the newly formed end of the extrusion back to its starting point and then allows you to move the control point without a mouse button press. Holding down the control key while dragging switches on snapping. Since snapping is usually set to increment, this forces the extrusion to advance in discrete steps. If we want snapping to be on permanently, press Shift and the tab keys together to toggle snapping. R will rotate the new control point, and S will scale the handles. Although it is rather awkward to do, pressing the center mouse button at the same time as dragging lets us dynamically choose which axis to extrude along. Even more awkward, holding down Shift at the same time as the left and center mouse buttons to restrict movement to a dynamically selected plane. Holding down the Shift key on its own while dragging gives finer control by being less sensitive to mouse movements. The second tool in the group is Extrude to Cursor, which extrudes the curve to the mouse pointer on each left click. The direction is dependent on the current viewpoint.